We are the off campus, obviously, Art Center of Metropolitan State University of Denver. I want to start off by telling you why this exhibition is important to us at the CBA. I've asked all the artists to answer this question too, so I thought it was unfair that I answered as well. So the mission of the CBA is to present opportunities to engage the community in dialogue about contemporary global issues. We do that primarily through the voice of artists, often who are also activists. The artists in Pink Progression are no exception. This microphone is really a little daunting. It's impressive. Anyway, sorry. Like I was saying, the artists in Pink Progression are no exception. So if you look at Mindy Bray's work, Breakdown and Breakthrough, which is right around the corner, it reminds us that we are on a precipice of change, and that while the outcome is unknowable at this point, we are presented with the opportunity to act. In this exhibition, there are universal themes and connections that draw us together, at least psychically, in an understanding that others have similar experiences and reactions to what is happening around us in the world. But of course, the individual experience and response is what makes the work so compelling. Stephen Frost's work, for example, We're Strangers Until We're Not, focuses on the energy and expanse of the Pride March, focuses all that energy on the individual response and the one-on-one connection. Through the experience of this exhibition, we can feel both part of a larger community and empathy for one another. I am grateful to all the artists in this exhibition, especially those who are here to share their story with us tonight. Thank you for being part of the dialogue. Your voice is important. I also want to acknowledge the staff of the CBA for their brilliance and dedication to making this exhibition and every CBA exhibition so strong. I'm so proud to work with all of you. And finally, I need to extend gratitude to Anna Kay for sparking this version of the protest march through exhibitions, and of course for her sustained energy in keeping that flame strong. Thank you. So Anna's going to get us started tonight, and then we'll roll through. We have 13 additional artists after Anna, so it should be a great and engaging program tonight.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Anna Kay, and I had the pleasure of organizing this exhibition, or this series of exhibitions, but I wasn't alone in doing this. I had help. So artists, Cecily Cullen, CBA staff, Kathy Lane, and Jamie Kopke at Boulder Public Library, and Jim Kroll at Denver Public Library all helped organize this exhibition. So on January 21st, 2017, over 3 million people came together to form the historic and global Women's March. This protest became one of the largest in American history. And so I was so inspired by this event that I wanted to see it happen in our creative community. And so I asked a group of friends and colleagues, artist friends and colleagues, if they'd be interested in participating in a show inspired by the Women's March. They all said yes. And so I asked them to invite their friends and colleagues, and the group grew to over 50 artists. Here's an image of Pink Progression artists at the March on Denver in 2018. During the marches, pink became a symbol of empowerment, and so I invited the artists to use pink as little, as much, or reject the color in the exhibition. I wanted to expand the exhibition further by inviting other creatives in the community, so I set out a call for submission for poetry and comic art. And I assembled our submissions into this book, Words, Resist, and Persist. And you can purchase this book through pinkprogression.wordpress.com. All the profits will go to nonprofit organizations in Colorado. It's a very emotive, powerful book. I recommend reading it. And it doesn't cost very much money. It's like $15. And you can also take a look at it. It's on the pedestal behind you. So I also set up a Facebook page so that artists could participate in dialogue and conversations before the exhibitions and during the exhibitions. And I compiled those posts into 2 books. The one on the left, the cover image is of pink chalk figurines that I gave to the artist, one of the many pink-inspired free giveaways. And then the cover of the book on the right is Irene Delco McCrae's Pink Palette. So you can look at these books as well. They're with the poetry book in the front. We wanted to open the exhibition further and allow anyone to participate. And so we created a call for entry, postcard art. So the idea is, and you're welcome to still do this, I still have my P.O. box. The idea is to create your own design and include a wish or hope for the future in relationship to women's rights and human rights. Send it into the P.O. box, and it'll be a part of a future Pink Progression exhibition. So we compiled the 250 postcards into an interactive display, a rotary Rolodex, created by Heather Mullins with relevant reuse. And this was on display at Boulder Public Library. And then we reassembled the postcards. We had at that point over 250 into a free-floating grid with Cecily Cullen and CBA staff's help, which you can see around the corner, kind of in the front of the gallery. And I also created some open projects for the community to also participate in. You can pick up a piece of chalk and write an inspiring quote from an incredible person or even your own quote. And you can write it outside, inside, and take a picture, hashtag Pink Progression, so that we can spread, so we can flood social media with empowering wisdom to promote human rights and equality. And then I also prepared these Pink Progression biodegradable glitter packets that you're welcome to take home today and sprinkle on something that inspires hope. Take a photo, send it into pinkprogression@gmail.com, or you can hashtag it. So if you hashtag Pink Progression on social media, I can find it. And I'm compiling these on our website. If I get enough, I can expand it into a larger project for a future Pink Progression exhibition. So we also have 39 artists take part in collaborations. Our 2017 collaborations involved 22 artists, which I divided into groups of 11, and I gave them each of the groups a large piece of paper, and the paper passed from one artist studio to the next. And each artist documented the paper as the composition evolved. So you could see who made what mark and how the composition altered through time. And you can see this collaboration in person. It's around the corner here. And then this collaboration was also done in 2017, and it's on view at the Denver Public Library. For 2018, we invited artists to continue the collaborations and invited more artists to expand our group further. And you can see those collaborations over around the corner. So Pink Progression began in February 2018 at Boulder Public Library, where we had 2 fabulous workshops, one from Frankie Tone and Stephen Frost, Rethinking the Pinking, which they're also going to have here at the CPM on August 4th at noon to 3. And then we also had another workshop with Katie Karen on vacuum forming. Here's some photos of those workshops, which were a lot of fun. And the exhibition is still currently at the Denver Public Library as well, but it comes down next weekend at the end of Saturday. So I loved a lot of aspects about this show, 3 of which involved that each artist interpreted the theme in all gender identities and expressions are represented in the exhibitions, and that each artist got to pick what they wanted to put in the show to enhance their freedom of expression. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background or context with my own artwork. I work with themes of calamity and survival, and I'll use nature as a symbol of that. So when the Women's March occurred, there were also wildfires in Green Mountain. And so in the spring, I explored those areas and I found wild roses growing prolifically. And so this watercolor painting, the roses in it became a symbol of empowerment, rising above oppression. And then for my CBA piece, which involves fire projection, I selected a native flux and used that as a symbol of empowerment as well, dealing with cycles of violence. So if you look around the corner, you'll see my piece. There's a flame that shows up in the middle. And so the flame that comes and goes, that becomes a cycle of violence. And the flowers and the green leaves always remain pink and green, emphasizing perseverance in the face of cycles of violence. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to hear from our 13 participating artists today.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Bunnell. There we go. And my piece in the show is titled Accumulate in Pink. First, I want to thank Anna, Cecily, and the CBA. This is such a wonderful experience to have been part of all of the Pink Progression exhibitions, but especially here at the CBA. It all came together really beautifully, so thank you. In order to answer the questions posed to the panel about why I chose to participate in the show and how the theme fits in with my work, I'm starting with some pieces that I consider typical of my work. There's two drawings here from a series titled Unnatural Boundaries. One full drawing on the left, and then a detail from a different image in that series on the right. I build my images by repeating a simple tick-like mark until it becomes a form. When one of these marks stands alone, it's quite insignificant and overlooked, so it's really about relatively simple parts coming together to form a more complex and powerful whole. My inspiration comes from things like clouds, which are formed by dust particles and water molecules, snowflakes that become a blizzard, flocks of birds flying in unison, and notes of music coalescing into a song, as well as individual people coming together for a cause. I decided to participate in Pink Progression because witnessing and participating in the women's marches were powerful demonstrations of what inspires me. In our current political environment, I often feel overwhelmed by what I can or should do to make change. But the marches and the Me Too movement especially remind me of the change and power that arise when ordinary individuals unite and persist in action. Specifically for my piece in this show, I took visual inspiration from aerial views of the marches such as this and this one. Images of the crowds such as these are zoomed out, and it's easy to see how each individual is part of a whole. I'm also visually interested in the way that some of the edges of these crowds are organic, while others are straight due to buildings or other physical barriers guiding the crowd's shape. Often my images take organic forms, but for the unnatural boundaries images that I showed first, as well as the piece of this show, I've added edges that are straight to create tension and intrigue. I have a few images of the process that I used to create the image in this show. I often start my work with small 2-scale sketches, and this is just 4 by 7 inches, so it looks huge here, but they're really tiny. Because my process is labor intensive, I often take old sketches and I add or delete marks or often collage the pieces of sketches that I have from previous work. And then I work on translucent vellum, which is what my piece in the show is on, as well as my sketches are always on that, so that I can overlap and see through and build my images that way. Then I create a sketch, or I actually just trace the image from the previous one onto a piece of vellum, and I refine the image, kind of flattening it out a little bit more. I also do color studies such as this. I had to do several for this series in order to get the composition to work the way that I wanted to. So my compositions are usually planned out quite specifically before I begin on the larger final piece. And here's the final piece that you can see in the show. It's 20 inches by 35 inches. The pink progression shows challenged me to use color. I generally work in black and white because of the minimalist nature of my work, and I also feel like black and white can allow the viewer to interpret the piece in ways that they, in their own way. Working in color allowed me to experiment with value in a different way, so using color to play with the value rather than just the marks accumulating or the marks more dispersed. And I use several colors to show the diversity of the whole, yet still there's a unification within this, this piece. It's creating kind of one big image. And you can see in this piece the kind of straight edges at the boundaries of this form, as well as some organic edges. And the scale for me, it's largish. For my work, in order for the viewer to see the piece from a distance and kind of get the feel of the whole form or the whole shape. And I always want that to help bring the viewer close to see that it's actually created of individual little marks. And that's all I have. Thank you.
My name is Mindy Bray, and I also want to thank Anna and Cecily. This has been a great experience. I especially enjoyed working here on the wall for my installation during the week that pieces were arriving and they were going up on the wall, and it was sort of a sneak peek behind the scenes of what everybody was bringing to the show, and it was very powerful to see everybody come together and what they were adding to the show. So I'm going to jump right into talking about my piece here at the CVA, which is just around the corner. It's called Breakdown, Breakthrough. And then I'll take a look at a few older pieces to provide a little bit of context for the piece. So I decided to participate in Pink Progression because I felt motivated to make work that speaks to this political moment, including the Trump presidency, the Me Too movement, and the disintegration of basic empathy, civility, and justice that I see on the news every day. I was also excited to participate in a group of like-minded artists, many of whom are women. I don't know that I've ever been in an exhibition of this size, with so many artists that are majority women. I've been in many exhibitions this size where there are some women included. And I was surprised to see how refreshing that felt, especially to be here working on my installation and to feel that I was supported in making my work. A lot of artists I was speaking with installing their work as well. We're also juggling family and work and jobs. And I didn't quite expect to feel that sort of inclusion that I did. So I wasn't sure at first how the show would fit into my practice. I tend to look at the intersection of urban and natural environments, and I use reduction and abstraction and photography to create sort of patterned images that are on paper, on canvas, or on the wall, as this one is. It was painted directly on the wall. So I began there thinking about the physical environment of the Women's March, which included the sidewalk and the streets that we were moving on. I began noticing and photographing cracks in the sidewalk, things that I saw every day on my walk with my dog or dropping my daughter off at school. And they began to speak to me about urban decay or even entropy and the sort of slide towards chaos. I would listen to the news, get out of my car, and find these images, and just felt like they sort of resonated with me. I also like that these forms, when taken out of context and changed in scale and perspective, began to seem like something that could be either falling apart or growing or both. And I liked that it held those two sort of sides of the Women's March. That there could be destruction of the old in order to make way for the new, and that there's some uncertainty to the moment, that there's a growing of a movement and also sort of a witnessing of a collapse. This is a detail of the piece. It includes the form that's on the floor. So I tried to include other aspects of the wall, including the floor and coming around the corner, so that it could become more environmental and so that the viewer could sort of step into this space and feel that it was sort of falling apart, that the cracks were growing through the entire architectural environment. I'll quickly touch on a couple of other things. So this is the piece that I included at the Boulder Public Library, and it's more typical of my past work. It also included pink. I have used the color in my work as a reference to sunsets, this kind of nostalgia for something that never happened, and also because it seems to enhance the abstraction of the image. So this is a foliage, and so the pink feels very good color taken from an urban environment. This was the piece at the Denver Public Library, which is basically a sketch for the piece that's here at the CVA, and was a way for me to start exploring the forms and the shapes that are in the installation. This is a piece that's more typical of my pieces on the wall. It's a large-scale installation at the Westin at the Denver International Airport. It's also painted directly on the wall and includes some three-dimensional elements. This was a piece at the Convention Center, also on the wall using organic shapes based on the Platte River that moves through Denver. And this is a more recent piece, which also includes the pink, although it's not really showing up on this image. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark Bradshaw. I've been making art in Denver for over 30 years. Taught at Metro, at DU. I currently teach at Europa University. I was invited by Anna Kay to be in this show. It kind of came to me as a little bit of a shock because I know Anna's work, and it's not the polar opposite of me, but it's very tight. I'm a loose painter, loose drawer, and what kind of sealed it is she came to a show I just had recently at Spark Gallery. It's called In Particular, and it's all based on this idea. There's a word called oleo. Oleo means parts in English, and so I wanted to make artwork that was little bitty parts that made up a big whole, part of the whole picture of something, rather than that. These are pastel. They're 4 feet by 5 feet, most of them. They're also handmade pastel. I make my own pastels. This piece is called Unkunft. I've also been titling them in German. I've been learning German for a couple of years now. Unkunft means arrival. And anybody that's seen the movie Arrival, that's kind of that shape of that spaceship in the middle. And I'm like, oh, that looks like that. I'll call it Unkunft, and it will seem really more eccentric. One of the reasons why I did this in the first place, and I think it's interesting to come from this point of view, is the March on Washington, after the atrocity of the election, everyone was just heartbroken and didn't know what to do. And there was many people, especially in the gay community, that just didn't know what to do. And when I saw the women just kind of rise up and do this, I was like, yes. It's not the first time that women have preceded any kind of gay rights-oriented thing. The women's movement before Stonewall and gay rights led the way for us to get more equal rights in America. So I'm all about supporting that kind of political energy. I forgot what this piece is called. They're all in German, so I'm all freaked out. But this is bright. I've kind of been really interested in doing these kind of weird things. See these dots, like holes, almost like bullet holes. Sometimes I've always felt like my work, people either get it or they just hate it. And that's true. Every show except for the last couple, I've had someone come up to me and tell me my work sucked. To my face. And I don't know where people get the gumption to do that. This is, I also titled them in a language called Esperanto. I don't know if people know what that is. It's an international language. This is called Stuptaro, which means stupid. And I really was going for pink, and I like this kind of luscious pink color. And I just wanted, I kind of sometimes mix color with muted colors. And someone said, why don't you just go balls to the wall color? And pink is actually my very favorite color. I associate it with human skin, at least Caucasian skin. Also make the connection of the gay reference. Pink is kind of a gay color. And I've always embraced that, and I've embraced my gayness, and so I just wanted to include this. You can kind of see this kind of line that goes across, looks like a railroad track. I grew up in West Texas, near a train, so often I put little weird images like that in there. So that's a train from West Texas. This is called Sich zu einem drehen, which means turn into one, turn into one. This was one of the last ones I did for the show. Very bright. I love this kind of emanating, see those kind of red and yellow dots that go across it. To me, it reminds me of something emanating out of your soul, like your whole being is coming out of that. So mainly my work is about me, and that's the reason I wanted to do this show. Anna and I did a very small piece right in there, and hope you have a chance to see it, and thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Irene Malcolm Crane. I didn't know I was going to have to run this myself, so this might be weird.
Tell us how to do it.
Do I?
Push arrow keys.
Arrow down?
Down or right?
Oh,
You can do that.
okay, I'm representing in my newest work, Preservation of Presence in Images of Absence. The impressions of a body that is no longer there has very little identity and is suspended in a state not of this world. I wish it to stand mostly for what survives of a person when they are gone, not the actual body, just the impressions left in the lives of others. It's an idea. It's an idea of preservation in the architecture of the cloth, of a person having existed. My idea of this person, or rather the absence, is that they become even more enchanting without specification and mysteriously still existent as aberrations. Only traces left, scarcely visible, echoing long after they are gone. The paintings and drawings are also standing for an insistence on being witnessed, earthly life, a presentation of having been here. Because what we do in life, who we touch, what we learned and taught, what we leave behind after we are gone, is toward the whole that preserves us all. I'm going to go through these. This one is a tree instead of a person. So this is earlier work that I'm going through now. And a lot of my earlier work was about identity of specific people. And I was very interested in this because I was always thinking about how each of us have never existed before and will never exist again, and that we're completely individual, we're completely ourselves. But then I started thinking, especially about this show, of the all, of how we really need to come together. And thinking about how selves kind of narrow down humanity. So these paintings and drawings leave out the physical being, the gender of the races, like what I've been doing, facial features that define, and are not present. But I'm going to go back. So they're more about what is not specific in order to create a preservation of a particular gene pool, which seems to be kind of what is going on in politics right now, that everybody has to be the same and the rest of you leave. But rather living for the welfare of others and the conservation of humanity. I think that our important duty in life is to secure lasting beyond our own selves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through my past work. This is Mother Without Father. These are my friends. And then some more body and cloth work. Worked with body and cloth so much that I started getting really interested in the cloth and did a series of just cloth. Sally Elliott. I've been an artist for a very long time, and I've taught forever at CU Denver, CU Boulder, in women's groups, and I was thrilled when I was asked to be in the show by Susie Mitchell, who is part of this as well. And I couldn't participate in the first women's march, but my daughter did it, so I had to over my head, and the walking part wasn't going to be so easy. But I was so excited to be in the show. And I said, I'll paint pink hearts. I've used pink hearts forever. I mean, red hearts. Let's see if I can find it. That's me, painting red hearts. And also, this kind of preceded an open heart surgery that I must have had a premonition about with my husband. So there's a broken rib cage in there somewhere. And this piece was shown at the Loveland Museum. And Maureen came up to see my studio. She said, "Can you finish this?" And I said, "Oh, sure." Well, this is gouache. It's gouache on paper. There's tons of layers, a lot of detail, and it does take a really long time. This piece was done before that. I tend to sometimes name things in Spanish, like Mark was doing German. This one is, I think this is Corazon con ojos de pescado, so heart with the shells. And the eyes got into the one that I did for the Denver Public Library too, and they turned into eyes of what I thought looked like people from all over the world, because they all suddenly were different colors, and these are not. And they sometimes have tears coming from them, but they're objects of personal significance. It's all a lot of dream imagery. I do not draw this, I just paint it, or I pick up an object and I paint it. I think I had one of those little oranges that I used over and over again, and I made up the eyes. My son gave me the bird's nest, which I tacked on the wall. That's my hand. I just sort of drew around it, I think, or painted it, and it's supposed to be a honeypot, I think. It kind of turned into that. I don't know what the painting's going to be until it's finished. There's one section of it. I'm wearing this necklace. This belongs to my favorite aunt, and it's a heart. And there are hearts in lots and lots of my paintings. Stemming from the death of my son 15 years ago, I started painting hearts. I had to do something, so I just started painting, and they were hearts. This is another part of it. There's a bird nest with eggs falling out of it. And I made up the bird. Of course, it doesn't look like a bird that I even looked at. And I did the grass too. At one point, I just started painting grass. And then, of course, I had to paint all around it with black paint, which was really very labor intensive, but I kind of like doing things like that. I like spending time. This is a more recent painting. This is called Lizard Migration. This one sort of focused on my garden, which is very important to me. I live in the mountains above Boulder. I look at things that I put in my paintings. This is a kale leaf that some critter had just eaten part of, and it got in my painting. And then the lizards, they run around in my garden, and they eat the bugs, which is great. And I don't know, there's a cactus in there, and there's the heart, which is coming apart. This one is in a show up in Boulder right now. It's called, let's see if I remember, Dream Migration, Dream Migration, I think, and they're flies. This comes from finding a whole pile of dead flies in the windowsill in my studio, and so I just used it as a model. Oops, I sort of didn't need to do that. There we go. There's also a cucumber in there that was from my garden, but it was one that sort of grew together funky, and so it was like, I like to paint things like that, that are not supposed, that you wouldn't put in the farmer's market because nobody would buy it, because it's a mutation of some kind. So there's the cucumber, and there's water in there, and pansies, and this one is a light from the other side, and this is a dream. And it had to do with the light that was next to my side of the bed and a little felt bird that someone that I really care about gave to me. And I think there are also sand dollars in there. the images are very unrelated, but I just find things or I think of things and I just start painting it. This one had to do with a bird that I found on the porch of our cabin and our house and had flown into the window and died. And I made a drawing of the bird and then buried the bird and made a painting called Ode to a Dead Sparrow. And there's a 9/11 painting, and there is a big one with my hand in it. And I'm done. Right? Sorry, I should have put the name on the
More Sally's pieces.
Oh, there we go. I almost did it.
I know. See how I do here. Good evening. My name is Bonnie Farrell Roman, and I've prepared notes tonight because last time I felt way too off the cuff. I've been making artwork using my handmade paper as a primary medium for over 20 years now.
How do I make it play? Is it going?
I push that, so I know what's going. Okay. In addition to the 3 works in pink progression, I've included images tonight from my motherhood installation series, which connect broadly to themes from the Women's March, though I won't be addressing them much in this short time. We were asked to discuss why we decided to participate in pink progression, what the exhibition means to us, and how it fits into our artistic practice. As the eldest of 4 girls and attending an all-girls high school, I was not exposed to much innate gender bias growing up. Then I took a women's studies class in college where I was shocked and appalled as I learned about the history and reality of women's oppression. It was a huge turning point for me, and I've continued to educate myself, becoming more vocal and active politically as the years have passed. Much of my early artwork, created as an undergrad, was strongly feminist, and I've returned to themes related to feminism, identity, and the female body through the years, interspersed with an abiding interest in scientific phenomena, especially in relation to physiology and organic structures. When Trump was elected, I felt personally betrayed by how many people in our country were apparently not bothered enough by the atrocities he committed to withhold their votes. I think I sobbed hysterically for hours on election night. Ever since his first days in office, I've been almost continuously horrified by what his administration is doing to destroy so much of what truly makes our country great. Even before the election, I had begun creating works influenced more by political ideas, less connected to deeply personal experience, and more outwardly focused. When I participated in the Women's March in 2017 in my hand-crocheted pink pussy hat, I felt galvanized to do something to push back, like so many others. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to be part of these exhibitions. Thank you, Anna and Cecily, for your tireless work to make them happen. Though I never used pink in my work much before this, creating artwork for the exhibition pushed me to stretch my palette. I found ways to incorporate it in these pieces that fit nicely into the body of handmade paper artwork I've been creating for many years, while also addressing political ideas in a metaphoric way. Pieces like Zoonosis, Contagion, and Propagation were originally inspired by the recent Ebola outbreak in Africa. I found a strong metaphor there in the phenomenon of a pathogen transferring from one species to another, as the virus had done, infecting humans by way of monkeys. This became a symbol for the way ideas, attitudes, and ways of thinking, both positive and negative, are spreading so quickly through our society, enabled by the internet and social media. In those pieces, I used bright red and magenta wool roving to represent a pathogen and its progress. In Zoonosis, the roving transfers from a plant-like form below to a cluster of cellular vessels suspended above. It's coming, I promise. The timing is a little off. The roving creates an unbroken line as it bridges the space between the 2 forms and crawls up and through cell-like clusters, growing and spreading. We're almost there now. In Contagion and Propagation, the invader originates within one of the cell-like discs instead and spreads to other cells through their shared points of contact. Touch allows the infection to cross from one cell to the next. Contagion, in particular, has the environmental slant as well, Several of the large discs are filled with digitally manipulated photographs I took at Yellowstone National Park that I color shifted in Photoshop. Here it comes. Toward oranges and reds to render them more biological and less geological. They remind me of blood vessels, cells, tendons, ligaments. This one is zoonosis that's based on the Ebola virus. In Contagion, the images from Yellowstone, there it is, look a little bit like something you'd see in a body opened up rather than on the earth. They wanted to invoke a connection between our bodies and the body of the earth. Propagation, the piece at the Denver Public Library, utilizes the same flat cell-like structure, but here the invading wool emerges from clusters of small cylindrical forms that seem to be growing on the infected cells, expanding the piece outward dimensionally. As with the other works, the spread of the roving can be traced back to its source from any point in the piece. The coloring of this piece is pushing further into the pinks and reds and away from the ambiguous coppery orange tones of its precursor. It makes it a little more gross. The waxed paper is very fleshy and almost bloody, looking like a wound. My newest piece, my last piece, is this ripening made by casting handmade paper over clay forms, then applying a pale yellowy pink beeswax over the hollow forms and melting the beeswax in. The elements contained within the fleshy vessels are also made of wool roving. And for the contents, I used pink to, there it is, okay, to kind of pink up. They're getting more pink as they reach maturity, indicative of passion and anger. The piece is an affirmation. We are growing, coming together as a political movement, gaining strength and getting ready to burst out into the world.
Thank you so much, and Cecily and Anna, thank you guys so much for putting this together, and Anna, thank you for putting together all the shows so far. It's been wonderful to be part of this. Let's run another round of applause here. I'm really honored to be part of this show and all of its previous iterations. This is a piece that I've included here. It's called We're Strangers Until We're Not. And this is a woven piece. I'm a fiber artist, a performance artist, and I'm also an instructor at CU Boulder in the Media Studies department. So I have a pretty eclectic sense of tastes, and this is a pretty eclectic piece as well. And so when you look at this piece, it's woven. So I started off with this piece thinking about building the structure that everything would come into. So I built a warp that included pink threads, because of course the pink threads being part of this theme that we're working through here. When I originally conceived of the piece, I was thinking a lot about not just the experience of the march, the Women's March, but also other marches that have always been really important to me. And for that, it's always been gay marches and gay pride and queer marches and those events that have always been really incredible. And the Women's March was an opportunity for other people to feel that same maybe sense of pride, that sense of justice, that sense of urgency that I always felt at gay prides. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to bring to the show, I thought about who had influenced me here in Denver and who had, and where I was finding that community and that sense of pride. Frankie Tone, who's also in this exhibition, I don't see Frankie here, but Frankie is an amazing pillar of the queer community here in Denver. And Frankie invited me to be part of the Secret Love Collective's march last year at Denver Pride. And Frankie's response, Frankie got into the parade, and Frankie's idea was that we would become part of the gay pride, but also sort of critique it. And that's always a great way to go through it. I don't know if you guys have ever been to gay pride here in Denver, or any gay pride, but basically in the last 20 years or so, and I don't feel like things used to be great, but they suck now. Things are great now too, but things also suck. And one of the things about Pride is that it is sponsored by Coors, right? It's sponsored by this, or it's sponsored by Facebook or Twitter or these other corporations, right? And which one of the things is that in the modern structure, and we see this a lot now, we look for our rights through these corporate entities, and that becomes a way in which we seek our sort of political upheavals. It's very, very true in our contemporary context with a allegedly millionaire president. And so this piece has a very straightforward path right through the middle of it, but you'll also see these other kind of elements that come into it. I used t-shirts and materials that were left over from that day of Pride, as well as this weird rainbow paracord that I had brought in as well. I often have started using, since I moved here to the Denver region about 3 years ago, I always think of like, how do I represent Colorado in my weavings? Because I'm not a person who uses a lot of natural colors. Unlike some of the participants, pink is a very natural place for me. And so paracord is often a material I bring in. I was like, that's Colorado. That'll be shorthand for Colorado. I'll bring in some paracord. And so you'll find that a lot in my recent weavings. And this is about that moment in the parade. Really briefly in my last minute, I did end up running a workshop in Boulder and have one here in August with Frankie Tone. And in this workshop, it's an opportunity for people to come in, discuss their feelings about the pussy hat and what the pussy hat represents to them, what it's come to represent in our culture, how inclusive or exclusive it can be in the culture for people of different gender identities, people of different racial representations within the movement. And then at the end of the workshop, after we've had a discussion about the history of pink, the context of the parade, we give people an opportunity to redesign a pussy hat for themselves. Although I'll give you guys a preview, we only bring like black and white materials. So it's all about structure and design. I hope you guys will be able to make it on August 4th. I think that's at noon. And thank you so much for your time.
I decided to participate in Pink Progression because I felt really an affinity towards the topic in relation to personal narratives that I'm exploring with my own work, and which deals with this concept of personal struggle. The landscape beyond the stone in this piece in the exhibition is actually a depiction of a reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The stone, which to me is the portrait of a woman, stands really solidly in front of this very phallic obelisk at the site. The piece itself is meant to be something like on human scale, so that when you stand in front of it, it is like looking at another person and having a dialogue with them. So the work is actually the eighth and the final piece in a series of standing stone paintings that I've produced over the past 2 years. This image of the works installed on site is kind of how I had originally envisioned them. The outdoor version of the work was called menhir. The term menhir means standing stone, and the full body of my current work really deals with the concept of the ruin. So with these earlier works, one of which is at the Denver Public Library, I would actually place an image of the ruin into the piece itself as part of the imagery. But now I have come to turning the paintings as objects into ruins themselves. And so you see in this image where this idea comes from, which stems from my own experience as an artist abroad in Ireland in 2014. So you can actually see me in the drawing, drawing in the stone circle in the upper image here. So I'm particularly interested in sort of the mystery of these stones. So standing stones are usually really difficult to date, and their use is unknown or speculated at. And with this piece, I'm interested in a mix also of cultural references. I did a more recent residency in China where I studied scholar stones. I found them interesting, and as these stones are basic objects that were actually found in nature, and really were items that were pretty much discarded by nature. And then they were picked up and placed on these elaborate pedestals and seen in a more sacred way and studied. So with this depiction of the stone circle and the scholar rocks, I brought to the piece also the sense of the American landscape as a contrast of East and West, known and unknown. So my choice to display the paintings is in reference to what I see as an American sort of ruin, the billboard. So it is this lone thing that gets left out in the barren landscape to be seen by the occasional driver until it eventually erodes and its message disappears. So the stone circle is displayed at CU South Denver at their Natural History Museum as a sort of one-day outdoor exhibition, which then extended into an indoor exhibition of the work. So here are some of the images of the individual pieces. So these first two were actually painted while I was in residence in Beijing. And then the following series developed from there. In essence, the piece is something like 3 landscapes in one. So you have the scholar stone, which is the imagined landscape that one would meditate on. Then there's the illusion of the landscape within the painting itself. So within these, each one has an image of an ordinary American landscape. And then there's the landscape of the physical environment that the painting sets within. And in this case, it would be the art environment. So while I was in residence in Beijing, there was one particular pile of trash that I walked by every day when I went to the metro. And I began to document it with some consistency and was interested in how it grew, and then it was swept up and then it grew again. And it was like a living creature within itself, and it told the story of the lives of the people in the village that I was living in. And so I wound up with a lot of photos of trash, and I was interested in this in relation to the stones, actually. This thing that was then the stone was something that was revered and honored versus the stuff that was discarded and simply tossed aside, and how the culture treats a people versus and what they put up on a pedestal or put in front of others that they want others to see versus what is unseen or unknown. So the trash is there in the painting. So if you look closely at the works, particularly the one here in the gallery is a bit easier to see. They're painted, the trash is painted in a precious metal, so gold, silver, or bronze to reference the Olympics, which China is hosting again soon. So the lines are like a ghostly trophy of sorts over the ordinary stone, which is a historically revered object. So the works are about what is held precious, meditated upon, or revered versus what is not. So in relation to this exhibition, I feel that we as women are often in the same confusing position. At certain times placed on a pedestal and admired for beauty, at other times tossed aside and ignored or discarded or undervalued. We have multiple landscapes within us, as well as with our own history of struggle, which is part of what the ruin represents. Thank you.
Before I start, I have something to pass out. Just take one and pass it through one at the end, middle. I'll explain it to you, you'll understand later. I'm gonna time out. Did you leave the timing on here? Did you leave the timing on here, or do I have to? No, I will just do myself. Okay. My name is Kim Perot, and thank you, Anna and Cecily, and all the support staff have been putting these shows together. It's fantastic. This is, it's been great being in the libraries, but this feels really special. And so it's really an honor to be part of this group and in this gallery. Can you guys hear me okay? So I'm going to answer your questions. I have a really loud voice, so I'm too. My children told me to shut up. Okay. So why did you decide to participate in Paint Progression? What does the exhibition mean to you, and how does Paint Progression fit into or not into your artistic practice? So I think I could probably stop here at this sign, but oh, it is going to go ahead. I'll just go back really quick. My sign, this fill in the blank. Is there still a child here? a bit. This pussy grabs back is how you're supposed to read it. And my family and my favorite sign, girl, hold my earrings, because I'm a jeweler. So that's my favorite sign. I had to slip that in there somehow. So I was asked by Kate McDonald, who I work with at Colorado Community College of Aurora. I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to show my work and, with well-known, like Mindy said, and like-minded artists who I respect. So this is going to show you some of my past work, and it is dated so you can kind of follow along and you'll see a common theme. The exhibition was a way to express my outrage at the result of the last presidential election, and particularly around how women were depicted and treated during the election process. Expression of this kind has not historically been a motivating factor in the creation of my work. I had a really hard time accepting how misogynistic our American society is and recognizing it in all its subtlety. I am an optimist, so accepting that being a woman or having a vagina likely prevented me from being taken seriously and or heard, even if I thought I was at the time, is hard to take. Participating in this show presented an opportunity to overtly out myself as a feminist artist and create work that depicted that. I chose to celebrate the young, or having a vagina. In the past, I have had an issue with pink. I have 3 girls, and when the first one was born, I made sure everyone knew not to send me anything pink. It was honored, and to this day, it's not a color she is drawn to. Fast forward to the next 2 kids. I ceased to care about this issue. I actually love the color. It features heavily in many hues in my wardrobe. My phone's even pink. I tend towards the darker pinks. As far as my work is concerned, I use red, which I consider a relative to pink, heavily when I use color. I use it for emphasis. I am mostly known as a goldsmith or a jeweler locally. However, my career in the UK, which is where I lived and worked for 14 years and where I studied my craft, largely revolved around my silversmithing or non-jewelry objects such as vessel, napkin rings, etc. There is a limited market for this in this country, and so my jewelry practice has grown. Interestingly, as the opportunity to participate, in Pink Progression came about, so did the invitation to have my first show at the end of this year at May Win down the road in November. The emphasis on my work for Pink Progression was to create silver objects after I first made the pink Yanni earrings, which will be up in a minute. I love rose gold, and using pink seemed really important for the first outing. And by the way, the rose gold earrings, which you're going to see next, are sold. For my second piece, I recycled a silver Yanni-shaped bowl and made a sculpture. What became apparent in my work is I can't even remember my writing. What has become apparent in my work is that when the scale goes up, the potential meaning of the work becomes considered. I don't assign meaning to my work, although my titles definitely tell you something if you want to go there. This is actually an important progression in my work. And so in a way, you could say Pink Progression helped me to progress. So you're seeing Yanni earrings, Eat Me and Drink Me are all part of the Pink Progression exhibitions. The Yanni, they all reference the Yanni, a sacred symbol and the origin of life. The origin of life is a theme I began during my college training and studies in London in 1992, 25 years ago, and it continues to. So you saw the whole history of my work. You can clearly see it's always been there, and in getting this PowerPoint ready, it was kind of like, oh wow, so I didn't have to change anything. I fit right in with this group, so it's all about the Yanni folks. Your little treat is juicy fruit.
Hello everyone, I'm Marianne Kokoska, and I wasn't physically present for the Women's March on Washington. Oops. I wasn't physically present for the Women's March on Washington on January 21st, 2017. I watched it on TV at home, and I remember saying to myself, I wish I could be there. Anna's invitation to be part of Pink Progression gave me the chance to join in and promote the goals of the Women's March through the power of art. It provided me with an opportunity to engage with a diverse, creative community and make a public statement for transformative change. My contribution to the Pink Progression exhibit here at the CBA is from my Permanent Red series of drawings. And this piece that you see here is titled Heat. It is a pastel on paper, mainly red, but in the family of pink. It is a response to my first visit to the Black Canyon on the western slope of Colorado, a deep, steep, walled gorge carved by the Gunnison River over millions of years. This reminds me that even in this present day, extreme patience and persistence are often needed to carve out a path in life and carve out a path for transformative change. Hopefully it won't be millions of years. Visually, the sight of the Black Canyon took me by surprise with its beauty and trepidation. It was a powerful and emotional experience. In Heat, I want to convey the intensity of the sun and density of the rock, as well as its captivating texture. I want to show you a few other pieces from this series. In many of these, I aim to capture the vastness of the space, feeling of magnitude along with intimacy, and a sense of timelessness. This is a departure from a lot of my large monochromatic installation work. Here's a couple of reference photographs. Thank you, and thank you, Anna, and thank you, Cicely.
Wow, this is quite daunting. And always a reminder of my height. Good evening. I need to continue to extend special thanks to Anna and Cecily, for who's always standing in the back, but just so kind, holding us all up. For curating the exhibition, their continued support and understanding for the need for such events, and the dedicated staff at the CBA as well as everyone else who has brought this together. My name is Lala Mekman. It's a hard name, so you can address me in any version of that and I will respond positively. I'm the faculty in Emergent Digital Practices at the University of Denver. The question of why I participate in Pink Progression for me was an honor and brought zero hesitation. The majority of my artwork addresses socio-political issues which inherently deeply impact the disempowered and underrepresented populations. Participating in Pink is important to me in the ways it brings solidarity, strong diverse voices, visibility, and the presence of so many artists in this community. For the sake of time, I'll share a few images from a few projects that are related both aesthetically and or conceptually to the new video I created for this exhibition, somewhere in there. And in particular, you will see continuities in the thematic presence of topography as well as power structures. In chronology, I will, thank you guys to leave that in there. I will share the works that were created. The work Men of God, Men of Nature was at the Denver Art Museum for 10 months with almost 500,000 visitors. Now, that's through the door, not necessarily seeing my work, but I like the number. Approximately, I created this perfect cube as I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the very difficult Daniel Libeskind architecture. I wanted to create something that was perfect in a very imperfect space. This is referencing the Kaaba, which is the House of God in Islam, Donald Judd's cubes, as well as Stanley Kubrick's 2001 obelisk. There are very different physical treatments of the inside and outside to bring this experience to you, to understand what you see is not necessarily what you experience and can
impact or believe you will have in regard to basically interacting with something. On the outside, there's topography of the Middle East, which is about 578 linear feet of this. On the inside, as you can see, is a very different experience with 404 linear feet of lattice works with a mirror behind it. And so you can never escape being in that space. One thing that's really critical about my work is it often involves interactivity, and your presence, regardless of whether you wanted to be there, you will impact what is happening in your surroundings. In this particular piece, there's 9 continuous monitors, and they show counterclockwise a rotation of 30,000 characters that approach you as you enter the space. The next work is Entropic Order. That's me in the photo for scale. It's approximately 18 feet by 12 with 3 inches deep, and about a ton of black sand, which is actually coal slime. The material is used for significance because it is a petroleum byproduct. It's a 2-axis drawing machine with a solid brass pendulum that hangs 13 feet and basically draws repeatedly a perfect pattern. So what happens is it draws this very intricate arabesque pattern until it is interrupted, and then it speeds up, and because it's a pendulum, it basically goes out of whack and creates these very circular drawings. What I find interesting is the debate or sometimes argument that arises during this work, where some people wanted to make this perfect pattern and others run around triggering the effects to see it do it, and they say, I did that. And so their presence is in some ways recorded in this piece for a week at least until it's erased. So that piece has garnered some interest, but it's really hard to transport given its size. And so I created a smaller version, which does have some different elements, including a monitor. So there's a camera that looks directly down as it's drawing, and the monitor has this amazing surveillance satellite point of view that lets you see every little detail that is occurring. This also has the black slab. I'm going to run through this. So tenuous hierarchy is over there, and you can check it out. It involves power structures across global borders. There's basically Farsi text in the middle that has war, peace, and power. The topography around it is of the Middle East. The ornaments around it define borders inside and outside, and the audio is a bit ominous, and the sources are from the NSA. Thank you.
I know that person. Oh, wait a minute. Uh-oh. Got the wrong glasses. I can't see. Oh, dear. Tell me. Oh, okay, good, that was, yeah. Oh, hello. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, let's get to it. Ah, there it is. This is the piece in the show, and it is a self-portrait. And doesn't it look just like me? No, it does. The little middle part, the middle part, which I can sort of, a minute, there we go, has a DNA sequence. So it's my self-portrait, but it's also your self-portrait. It's your pet frog's self-portrait. It's your pet mosquitoes. It's everything alive on this planet's portrait. So there's a kind of, I guess we're gathered together, whether we like it or not, and we have a sort of a, we are all the same. And I mean, it doesn't answer the pink progression issue very much, but since everybody talked about it, I don't think I have to. I agree with everybody. I think totally. But I thought that was sort of a good way to discuss the fact that we are all of a piece in a way. So that is this painting. Then, this incredibly pink painting is the painting that's in the Denver Public Library. And let me just say that all my work has science and art put together. So in this piece, which is so pink that it just shocks me, actually, it's so funny. It's the chemical structure of estrogen, because women, that's a basic sex hormone for women. Men have it too, but it's, makes things work for most of us, and all of us that are women. And I felt like I should maybe eventually do a painting that would be the counterpart of the testosterone, which almost looks exactly the same. So I really guess we're kind of all together in this crazy universe. Me, the little me that was floating in that black thing, it's me, a piece of dust floating in the universe, and so are you. Anyway, so the next one was in the gender library. This one shows the chemical reaction that makes roses smell. So it's called Smell the Roses. And this one I thought was good because for the first show, because that's what we need to do. We need to wake up and smell the roses in many, many different ways. I mean, there's a lot of problems on this earth, and it's not just men and women. It's a lot of other things, and we really need to address them, I think. So that's me. And thank you. And thank you, Anna. Thank you, Cecily. Thank everybody. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Martha Russo, and this is all a complete surprise to me. What you're going to see is the first time I'm going to see it, because I actually was supposed to be away this weekend, and at the last moment I could come and give a talk. But what I didn't know is we were supposed to put a PowerPoint together. So here we go, let's see what we've got going here. All right, here's my piece that's right over here. The title is Pull. I selected this piece, I have never shown it before. I made it about 30 years ago. At the end, it was the last piece I made when I was in graduate school at CU. And when I entered graduate school, I was about 33. And I had actually gone, I thought I was going to be a doctor or a psychologist, and I studied developmental biology and psychology. When I got to CU, I was terrified, because I had never been around people talking about art. I had just made stuff, and I really didn't know what it was about, and it was all about gut reaction. So for 3 years, I literally made guts. And the last piece I made, this piece called Pull, is depicting a large stomach and sort of this tension of something being pulled. And I was really nervous getting out of school because, we were protected there. We got to just work on our work and make our work, and nobody bugged you. And now, all of a sudden, it was something about the art world. So that big ball at the end is actually all these remnants from my studio, and mostly fruit. I had been experimenting with fruit and pig intestine, and there's literally there's bananas in there, there's raspberries, strawberries, but there's a little bit of pink coming out, and I thought, that's the piece I'll show. And it's displayed on a table that was to try to give reference to some kind of dissecting or something that had to do with the science world and looking at things very carefully. The rest of my work, my current work, is made up of lots of multiple parts that create this gestalt. This is called phagocytosis, which is also related to a biological process where a cell kind of devours another cell, gets bigger and bigger, and then it will burst and recreate and keep proliferating. So a lot of my work is about parts to whole and proliferations. Another series called Nomos, I've been literally working on for about 30 years now, and the piece continues to grow and grow. And there are these small tendrils of handmade porcelain that are then configured into lots of different types of arrangements. This is the most recent one, which is from March 2016 at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, where I really wanted the piece to envelop people. So I'm going to stop there. I know there are more slides, but I think we're in good shape. And we've heard so many wonderful things from so many artists. And one of the things I wanted to end with is why I feel that a show like this is super important. I was listening to NPR the other day, and it was about female composers. And the story talked about how the season for the LA Symphony, there were 59 pieces that were going to be performed, and there was one female composer of all those 59. They talked about, it went on and on throughout the country. There's just so few female composers that are being played. And I thought, here we are, how far have we come since the Girls, and everybody making us think about how many female artists are in museum shows and whatnot. So shows like this are really important, and we have to continue to do it. And one of the reasons that my idea of the parts to whole is resonating with me. But I want to end with an excerpt from the commencement speech at Barnard this past spring. It was given by Abby Wambach, who is the most goal-scoring female soccer player in the world. And she said, in 1995, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park after being absent for 70 years. In those years, the number of deer had skyrocketed because they were unchallenged, alone at the top of the food chain. They grazed away, reduced the vegetation, so much that the riverbanks were eroding away. Once the wolves arrived, they thinned out the deer through hunting. But more significantly, their presence changed the behavior of the deer. Wisely, the deer started avoiding the valleys, and the vegetation in those places regenerated. Trees quintupled in just 6 years. Birds and beavers started moving in. The river dams the beavers built provided habitats for otters and ducks and fish. The animal ecosystem regenerated, but that wasn't all. The rivers actually changed as well. Plant regeneration stabilized the riverbanks, so they stopped collapsing. The rivers steadied, all because the wolves were present. See what happened here? The wolves were feared as a threat to the system. They turned out to be its salvation. Women are feared as a threat to our system, and we will also be our society's salvation. So with that, I hope progression continues, and we have to continue this regeneration and inclusion, and let the birds come back, and let the deer figure out who's the boss. So with that, I want to say incredible thanks to Anna Kay. Like, everybody's been thanking her, and we cannot thank her enough. And the hope is we continue and we get more and more people. And just by showing up here, and all of you showing up here tonight, we gain strength. And the wolves will start to howl louder and louder. Thank you, CBA, and thanks everyone.
Wow, what a great way to end. Thank you, Martha, and thank you all of you so much for staying on time. I know it's hard to talk about your work in 5 minutes, but we wanted to keep it all moving, and you did a great job. So on your chairs, we have a flyer with the rest of the events, so please take note and please come to those events. We also have a short survey, which we would love to have you fill out. It helps us in grant writing and reporting, so if you wouldn't mind, we'd appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming.
All the lines, all the waves, ribbons of energy locked to the poles in eons past.